the Cameroon National Baptist Convention. I would like you to briefly tell our viewers about this convention. Where did the CNBC come from?
The Cameroon National Baptist Convention had been as a field under the Cameroon Baptist Convention, Belo field. Due to between 1994 up to 97, there were some administrative squabbles, administrative difficulties, and it seems as if those who were there could not manage it well. And then in 1997, there was the Anyajwa declaration that Belo was going to off her hands from CBC and stand as a convention in its own. Since then, there has been a lot of fight. There has been a lot of nasty things that happened during the time.
Tell us, Reverend the Executive President, which were some of the lapses that led to the breakaway of the Belo Council of Baptist Churches?
One of the lapses was that the people delayed for a dialogue to meet and nip the problem at the time it was still young.
Which was the problem? What particular problem was existing?
Letters had been written. Okay. Anonymous letters had been written. Okay. And complaints have been given. Talking about the marginalization.
Okay, so the churches in the area complained that they were being marginalized.
Marginalized.
Okay. By the CBC.
By the CBC. Okay. And it was alleged that in one of the general sessions, I was not there. One of the general sessions, maybe Indu or Limbe, the then president of CBC openly provoked the Belo people in a letter that they wrote. It is said that he said that was a trash and dumped it somewhere. Okay. And so the Belo people decided to leave the general session prematurely. These stories I hear, I was not there by then. They left the general session prematurely. And then when they came back, there was the issue of Mr. Nyaki, who was from Belo Field and happened to have been chosen as the education secretary of CBC. And the CBC people didn't welcome him as the education secretary. And I hear the argument is that late Reverend Yonkuma of blessed memory had been the education secretary for CBC for 15 years. How comes it that another command is coming, next person is coming to a command? So that was the argument. And with all those arguments, the Belo people break away. I must be also sincere to you that there were some selfish interest in the issue. Okay. Yes. On the part of the CBC or the CNBC? Both. Okay. Yes, there were some selfish. Some of the excesses that were recorded? Yes, there were some selfish interest because if they had agreed to come to a compromise and came, because I know in one of the FCCs, the president of CBC really came to Bamenda, to Belo. For the issue, and when he came, they discussed the issue and took the resolution they took. But after Belo, I hear he made one of the elites of Belo by then, and then he changed the decision, and so the people became very angry. So to me, I saw that was a personal interest, that was selfish. You couldn't take decisions that were taken in the meeting, and then they changed it. I thought that these are some of the. Some people had some selfish interest. Some people even promoted. In fact, what happened during the crisis in Belo Field and CBC is just like this, our Anglophone crisis, because it's like some people do not want the crisis to just get ended. If at least somebody is benefiting something there, and another person is losing something. So that's how the crisis worked.
And so how did it actually happen? I learned some people were locked up in jail, some people were beaten, some were even poisoned.
Yes, many people were locked up. I cannot prove who was poisoned, but I hear many people were also poisoned. But I know that Reverend Fointama, who is of blessed memory, Mr. Ibang, who is still alive, Bove Jeremiah, who was in Belo, was also locked up. They served prison term for more than 6 months. There's one of our pastors, one Mani, he was locked up in Bamenda too, in prison, and he spent prison term for about 2 years. And all those are excesses that we launch ourselves into it.
And finally, that gave birth to what we call today the CNBC. So let's talk about the CNBC.
Finally, in 1997, the famous Anyadwa Declaration was made, and CNBC had its birth from Anyadwa.
Let's talk about that declaration. What was the content of the Anyadwa Declaration? Any particular thing you can remember about the declaration?
Well, one of the content was that the CBC, that the Belo people have decided to stand on their own, and to have nothing to do with CBC. And in that year, 2 conferences were held. The one for Belo Field under CNBC was held in Anyadwa, and the one for CBC was held at Wombong. That really showed that there was a clear division. Yes. Those are some of the content. And about the people who voted, almost 340 people voted for, and 2 did not vote, and maybe 1 was.
That means we had about 340 something people.
Yeah.
And then 340 voted to be separate.
Yes.
And 2 voted that we remain with the CBC, yes. And maybe 1 was indifferent. Okay. Now, that gave birth to the CNBC. Yes. Now, let's talk about the life of the CNBC from that day.
I may have very little to talk about the life of CNBC, because at the time I was in the seminary, and like the first general session that was held at Abu, I was not in Com here. So I really came into the issue to witness many of those things from 2004 when I graduated from the seminary. But before we went to the seminary, there was a crisis. I remember even one time in the seminary, we were sidelined as CNBC people, and gave us some trouble in the seminary, but it wasn't as hard as it came in the later years when I left. But when we came back in 2004, it is from then that I can say what I have seen, what I saw, and how the things manifested.
So what did you see? What do you know?
From the beginning, when I came to Mingo in 2004, in May, 8 Christians of the church were locked up in Bamenda Central Prison. So that was the first experience that I had. I went up there.
Christians of your church?
Of my church were locked up, and the charge was that they break a seal that was sealed in the church and wrote a letter. I saw the letter, the letter they wrote. So
what was it saying?
No, he was saying that their church belonged to them, and that they could not be stopped from entering there, and so they break the seal. So they were charged for disobedience to the government. So they locked them in prison for about 2 days. After some time, they came out, and then thereafter, other men were arrested, like the Reverend Jam, Pa Jam Daniel, Jeremiah, the young Kumas. About 16 of them were arrested and locked up in Bamenda. And we struggled, people struggled, and they came out. And other arrests were done. So many, in a way that I cannot enumerate all of them.
Were the
but many arrests
were
were
done
done
on the part of the CNBC, or equally they were arresting people on the side of the CBC?
I don't know a particular CBC person that was arrested. I cannot say for sure if I know one. If I know one, I cannot know. And then the court cases. They are going to courts every month. They will read so many cases, sometimes 5, 15, and one particular person will appear in all the cases. But
and up to now, are the cases still in court, or the cases were thrown out?
They are still in court.
Okay.
Though we don't go to court, the cases are still there.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if they one day resurrect the cases, but they are still.
When last did you go to court?
At the beginning of this crisis, when I went to the office in 2017, when this crisis was beginning, I went to court for about 4 times.
And all these times you went, what were the charges?
Why I went to court was that the house where Reverend Jam lived in, when he was leaving, it is alleged that he handed the keys to Reverend Cham, the CBC executive president. And then when we discovered that the keys were not in our disposal, we went and put new door shutters. We made iron doors, kept on the doors, and then the district pastor of Belo was using that house. And then the then field pastor of CBC, that was Reverend Jaffet Jongabi, he took the gendarmes, and they got the district pastor of Belo, Reverend Kaimbo Simon, locked him up in the brigade at Belo. So when I got the story, I decided to go to the field pastor's office at BCH Engineering to find out what happened, that you will get a pastor and lock up. He told me that he got the instruction from his hierarchy. Then I told him I was going to go to his hierarchy. Before then, the thing was already in court. They had called me, asked some statement, and then they registered it. Then I was already going to court. So I even went to Bamenda. We tried to resolve it, and it was not resolved. So we stayed, and we are going to court. With this crisis, the person who was representing CBC never came again. Even though he had only one person was coming, but CBC, when they went there, they called the field pastor. The field pastor never passed there. There was only one Yumlo, somebody from Bamenda who used to come. I hear he's a trustee, somebody, I don't know much about it.
So the case till now is still in the court?
It is in the court and other ones.
The other ones?
The other ones, maybe some of the people are dead. Those that belong to the convention, they are still there. So I know that they are there.
Now, with all this, have you been trying to chart a way forward? You are the executive president of the Cameroon National Baptist Convention. Your term of office, the 2 terms, will be expiring in the next 9 months. During your reign or your leadership, have you tried making peace with those of the CBC?
As much as possible. I know that I and my chairman, we met Reverend Cham and the chairman of CBC, Mr. Chabunkeng, George Chabun, who was the journalist. We met him. We met in one meeting in Bamenda and tried to see a way forward. Before then, we had also met in our general council when I was still the secretary in Belo, and we chat away. We were trying to see how we could reconcile. And then I and my chairman, Dr. Ngam Gilead, Mr. George Chabunkeng, and the executive president of CBC, we met again in Bamenda in one other meeting, trying to see how far we could go. And on a personal note, I also met with Reverend Cham one time in Bamenda, out of the Baptist Center. I know I met with him one time to see how far we could go. But what had made our reconciliation very strong and difficult to come by is that CBC has a stand that is so strong, and CMBC also have their stand. And in the course of this meeting, we have made our stand very clear. Okay. And
now you are representing the CNBC. What's your stand?
Our stand as a convention is that we can reconcile with CBC, not to say that CMBC will not exist. We will live as brother or sister conventions. Okay. That is our stand.
And that of the CBC?
That of the CBC is that CMBC cannot exist alongside with CBC. Okay. So those are stands that. Okay. Yeah.
That will making it difficult for a possible reconciliation.
Yes, it makes it difficult.
Now, looking at it, you have your stand, the CBC has its own stand, and this has been there for over the years, and obviously your tenure is coming to an end. So let's look at now the CNBC, right? What is the mission of the CNBC. Talk about the mission of the CNBC, the vision, because I think I was talking with somebody, the person said this convention has no mission. Okay. Yeah, it hasn't a mission. It doesn't seem to be having a vision. So where are we going to?
Okay, the vision of CNBC is one, as the missions of the church.
Okay.
The mission of CNBC is to glorify God,
okay,
through worship, evangelism, discipleship, and holistic ministry. Okay. By holistic ministry, I mean we reach out to others in the areas of education and the hospital. By evangelism is that we get people outside, far away from Christ. We share the gospel with them. Then the inward ministries will be worship, discipleship, because we only disciple people whom we have evangelized. We cannot be discipling somebody who have not evangelized. That is the inward ministry of the church. That is, I think that's the whole ministry of CNBC. If somebody says that we don't have a mission, then the person too should not really know what he too is doing. It's the same mission of the church. The mission of the church is to glorify God through worship, evangelism, discipleship, and then education, and then holistic ministry. Holistic ministry involves so many things. You make Christianity so wide but an inch deep when you only embark in evangelism. Okay. You can't disciple people when you have not evangelized them, and you cannot evangelize an end. I'll quote John Piper, who says that missions exist because there is no worship. Our age for evangelism and discipleship should come as a result of our worship for God. Okay. And so it is those who worship God that go out for evangelism, to bring people to join in worshiping God. That's what Piper means by saying that missions exist because there is no worship.
Now, talk about your vision. Where are we going to?
Well, our vision is to grow the church and develop the community.
Okay. And have you been doing that?
At least we are doing.
Okay. Are there some visible things that we can point to say that this is what we've been doing to grow the church, touch the community?
Yes. Of recent, there is a women's empowerment vocational center in Fundong. Okay. That was inaugurated 20th of January. Okay. That is a point to grow, a point of development.
That means it has been constructed by the CNBC.
It has been constructed by the women's department of CNBC.
Okay.
It is there.
Okay. Well, what does it do?
They do embroidering, sewing, marking, and beating, and computer. Okay. So those things, they are not done only to the members of the church. There can be people around who also come, and they will be developed in one way or the other. And it will also bring development to the area where it is.
And since the inauguration, have the community, people from the community, have they been visiting the center? Have they been trained in the center, or is just there and people are not using it?
For now, the chairlady who was supposed to pilot it, just because of these senatorial elections, she left. But he had given instruction to the vice, okay, who needs to gather himself now and get. So he already has about 15 people that have enlisted to start training. Okay. I think that by the mid of this month, the center will go operational. Okay. That's development. Okay. We have other areas like the schools. Remember in 2017, only Christ the King, which is a school under CNBC, went in Fundong. Okay. Only went operational. And even when schools began to timidly operate, it is Christ the King that championed it. Okay. And I think that there can be no development if people are not educated. Okay. The school in Belo, ABC, though it's not attending in his premises, at least this academic year, the doors were open. Okay. And there are about 60 students there. Okay. studying. The primary school in Belo is going on, and many other schools of the CMC are operating. So that's part of the development, and it's part of the holistic ministry. We are trying to operate a medical unit, though very timidly, but like tomorrow there will be consultation in Fundong, JMBC. The medical team will be there to consult. Those are things that bring development and do holistic ministry to people.
And I was equally told you have a bank.
Yes, we have a bank in Fundong that has survived the crisis.
Okay.
It never closed its doors. Every other bank closed its door in Fundong, but that bank functioned all through up to today. That's part of development.
That's CNBC Bank.
That's CNBC Bank.
Okay.
Standard Finance.
Okay.
Yeah.
And which are some of the projects that you think that in the upcoming years this convention will be able to realize? Which are some of the earmarked projects of the convention?
Recently, we have, by next week, the Director of Evangelism will enter his house, built by the convention. I've been living in my own for 2 years, built by the convention. A place that used to be a forest, you go there now, you see but houses. And we have also had a space for a decent office of the convention to be done in the years ahead. We have Christ the King had a lab. We saw an age for the lab in the school. So for the past 2 years, we invested close to 2 million for lab equipment, and they are using a hall in school. But we intend to build one. We intend to build one and even improve its infrastructures. Okay. I think that these are long-term projects meaning that they will remain. Even if I leave office, another person has to continue. You see that a decent lab is erected for Christ the King, and then the office of the executive president or the office of the convention that will embody many other offices will be built.
And where is the seat of the convention found?
The seat of the convention is at Fundong, precisely at Fujwa, beside Cameroon Baptist Church, Fujwa. Yeah.
Now, how many churches left the CBC and became the CNBC? Is there growth since then till now, or still that number is existing?
I cannot say exactly how many, but I know that there is growth. Okay. Because even in Belo, many churches have been constructed. There is no district that has not added the number of churches.
How many districts do you have?
I have 6 districts.
Okay, which are?
Ake district, headed by Reverend Som Jacob. Abu district, headed by Reverend Jum N.S. Chia. Fundong district, headed by Reverend Mayele Francis. Wombong district, headed by Reverend Kukwa Peter. And then Anyajwa district, headed by Reverend Gam Erastus. Belo district, headed by Reverend Kaim Simon. Yes, these districts have independent district pastors. District pastors that do not belong to churches. Their ministry is only to move around and see. And out of Boyo, many churches have been planted. Example, this church here is one. Yes, it never existed as a CBC church. Okay. Has been there. There are churches at Mekenene, there are churches at Lum, there are churches at Tonga, all along. There are even churches in the southwest region of Cameroon belonging to CNBC.
So far, how many regions is the CNBC trying to cover?
We have only had churches in the northwest, southwest, littoral, and the west.
Okay. And can you?
And then the center region.
So, do you know the approximate total number of churches you are controlling?
We have close to 150 churches.
Close to 150 churches. And the number of Christians, do you know?
Number of Christians close to 14,000.
If you're just joining us, we are talking with the Executive President of the Cameroon National Baptist Convention, Reverend Sue Joel, who is talking about the CNBC convention that broke away from the Cameroon Baptist Convention, the CBC, and this was what we called the Belo Field Council of Baptist Churches that did complain about the marginalization of churches in that area, and since they were unable to come to terms to settle their differences with the mother convention, the CBC, then they decided to form the new convention, which we call the CNBC, and we have learned that they moved from court cases, very funny things that happened when this convention was born, and then from there growth has come and the convention has been expanding to other regions in this country are gradually being covered by the Cameroon National Baptist Convention, notably the northwest region of Cameroon, the west region of Cameroon, the littoral region of Cameroon, and the center region. These are some of the 4 out of the 10 regions in this country that are covered by the CNBC. Sir, some people think that though you say you're planting churches, you just go where your Christians from maybe Boyo division left you, and you go there, gather them, and you make a church. And that in many of your churches there just come people there, so you're just following your people and you gather them. That is not really church planting, because you don't go into other communities to make them part of your church. Is this true?
Well, it is true to an extent, but to some extent it is not true. When I take a look at the Bible, the children of Israel moved with their God. Wherever they went, they worshipped their God, so that people should see and join. And I think that if CBC is growing wide, is because they've come to a point where they will get other cultures. I worked in a place in Mankwa, in Melon. They call it Douala Up. There's a CBC church. I worked there for 2 months. They are all people from Ndu. But where is Mankwa? In the littoral. There was no Ndu man. There was nobody from that zone. They called me Baminda church pastor when I was there. But that was a CBC church. So if you think that CMC should do different, it is obvious that when people go to a place, they move with their God and plan and begin their own worship and begin to do it. If others join, my encouragement is do it and others will join. In a place where there are no, like the church you have in Douala, there's no command there. In Masombo, there's no command there. So it's a church. We have 2 churches there. There's no command there. So how do you think about that? It's that we have few of those churches, but most of our churches. But my encouragement is that even a church like this one in Yaoundé, if I were here and I were in Baminda, I would tell them to stop the com choirs, but sing the vernacular choirs, where you could sing Lamso, sing Oku, sing Bafme, sing Com. It will not just be a com choir, it should be the vernacular choir.
As the executive president, I think you still have the powers to do so.
That has been my encouragement to most of those churches outside. When I went to Lom during their conference, I sounded very hard that you cannot be in Lom and singing only in Com. Sing in the vernacular so that those people can come in and teach their own songs, so that you sing in every dialect. That would be important. But I will not stop Com people from opening churches, because if they open, they will only become people. That I will not do also. If you think that is a tribal church, churches begin like that. It is of recent that CBC is going into the north, even in Yaoundé here, but it had in the past concentrated in Baminda and the Oku and all the like. It became, when I went to Melon, they called me the Baminda pastor when I was doing internship in a CBC church. But they were all people from Magua. All Magua. There was nobody there, a francophone. So
Now, is there something you are doing, though it's a very small, insignificant issue? We might describe it that way, that yes, many communities are not part of it that much now. But are you thinking about other strategies that, apart from you saying that, okay, the vernacular choir should, they should sing in the languages of different tribes? Is there another thing you're equally thinking that churches should do to encourage their neighbors, those where the churches are built, to be able to fellowship with them, to become members of that church without easily feeling like they do not belong?
Yes, I've been encouraging them. When you begin a church somewhere, it is obvious to meet the choir head and present yourself. Meet the government authorities and present yourself. Like there's a church in Manjo, Ngo, and it was like when they were beginning it, the people had some difficulty accepting it. But when I sent a letter, the Jew accepted it, and the church is functioning. There are not only com people there. So it is good, and on our part, we are also trying that in the days ahead, when we produce our literature, we will also translate some of the literature in French, so that the French Christians can read and study, not feel that they are set aside. And in Yaoundé, we don't only preach in English, we preach and translate in French. That's okay with me. It's part of that change, so that if a French person happens to enter here, he will not be like he's confused.
Now, do you have a seminary, other institutions where you train your pastors? How do you go about this?
We have a seminary in Fundong Baptist Evangelical School of Theology. That's the seminary we have. That's the lone seminary we have. And that's where we train our pastors. That is like a nursing bed for the convention pastors, where they are trained and they do ministry.
Let's just take a typical example. I think there was something that circulated on social media lately talking about your convention, involving one pastor, Pastor Moses. I want to remember, because this was on every lip on social media, that you masterminded the beating of Pastor Amu in his church somewhere. Is it true that the CNBC got involved in the beating of that pastor?
Those are allegations to destroy the church. Had been dismissed in April 2022. And when he was dismissed, a college of pastors went to that church on Sunday, and he was dismissed openly. We dismissed him and we asked him to leave. And after that, I followed up. I went to that church to make sure that he had left. All right. But when he left, these are things that I hear. When he left, he went and somebody took somebody's land and gave him to build his own church. So it was taken to the traditional council. He snubbed the traditional council. And so the thing was taken to Kwifon. And then the Kwifon entered it and had him beaten as they did. That is a bit of the story that I know. It was not CBC CMC that masterminded it. It's just a way, sometimes you give a dog a bad name to hang it. So he intended giving CMBC a bad name to hang it, which is not true.
Some say that...
I've never gone to the Kwifon.
Some say that when the Kwifon came beating, they asked the Christians he had then to move back to the former church.
I don't know, but they never did it. They have not come back to the former church. The former church is there with their pastor. The former church has a pastor now. So we asked him to leave. We never asked him to not begin a church. We asked him to leave our church.
Why dismiss a pastor?
Because he acted on norms that were out of our norms as a Baptist. One of the things he did, he was an insubordinate pastor. And as a pastor, when you graduate from the seminary, you sign a document in the executive president's office giving you your terms of reference, how you minister. And so when you violate any of those documents and we try to bring you back and you refuse, we have a right to dismiss you.
Was he against the Bible or just ethics norms put in place?
He had some false teachings.
Okay. Some of them.
Yes, he had some false teachings. He would tell Christians, one was that Christmas should not be celebrated. Yes, that was what I can say. That's what break the camel. He even argued with Christians in the church. When he came and he was trying to tell them that, and we sent a pastor to talk to him. We called him in the ministerial council, but he will not change. So we had nothing to do but to dismiss him.
So he argued that Christmas should not be celebrated. Yes. Argued with the Christians, and this causes.
Christians were arguing with him.
And this causes dismissal.
Yes, we say no, we will not get that in. It's a duration.
All right, let's get to talk briefly ministry before we close this interview, Reverend. Look at the church in Cameroon. Where is the church found now in Cameroon? That time you went to the seminary, the call of God. You were coming out, you had a burden. Are you sure the church today still pursues what you had as a burden there?
Yes, they have not derailed from their course. The purpose of the church stands the purpose of the church. If it is CBC, I've not seen them abandoning the purpose of the church. If it is CMBC, if one person have done it, it is not a collective action that the church has not pursued the main purpose for which it's existing for. I don't think so.
So if somebody says the church in Cameroon is failing, you don't stand to agree with such a person?
I doubt if I was stand to. It is not failing completely as the person thinks. The church is evolving. The church is growing. Okay. The gospel is being preached. Many people are studying the word of God. And those are marks of a healthy church. Many people have been studying the word of God. Many people get involved in church planting. The Bible is being translated into common dialect. That's a mark of growth. And you can't say the church is failing. And translated in the other dialects. There's Lamso, Bafut, many others.
This I'm talking. We are going out of. We are not just talking about Baptists now. We are talking about the general scenario in Cameroon. Do you see certain things in ministry out there that you are not comfortable with?
Obviously, the church, in normal cases, when any organization becomes too large, it is bound to have problems, managerial problems. If we are only managing a church, a small church, the world is becoming too large, the population is growing, the technology is increasing. In fact, before you may be preaching on the pulpit, and before you read a text, somebody has googled the message and is thinking of what should be said. Right? Mm-hmm. And if that is happening, many people are shipping the books in their bookshelf to places where this technology is not highly developed. Mm-hmm. Most of libraries in the world are in the phones, because the books I have in my phone here are more than the books that I have in the house. Mm-hmm. If I need to do a research here or preach a sermon here, I don't need to go look for concordance or dictionaries at home. I simply sit here, do here and do here. And so I don't think the church is failing. The church is revolving in all its entirety. If there are lapses, they are just lapses because the world too is fast growing and developing. It's not that the church has failed in its mission. I don't think so.
Okay, we're about closing this interview with the Executive President of the Cameroon National Baptist Convention, Reverend Sue Joel, who has been sitting with us for some few minutes or an hour or so now, and he is on his visit to the church in Yaoundé, Cameroon. That's Zion Baptist Church, Yaoundé, Cameroon. That's where we are recording this interview. Today he is on a visit to this church before the tenure of his office comes to an end come December 2023. This particular question, I think I talked with one of the senior pastors. This was on the 31st of December 2016. I was talking with Reverend Yonkuma the day he was retiring from pulpit ministry. And I said, now, if he's going home today, is he going home with his head high and shoulders lifted, happy that he is leaving a well-prepared church? I'm going to ask you that same question. You'll be leaving this convention in the next 9 months. Will you be leaving with your head shoulders lifted high? Reverend Yonkuma said something, and I quote, that he's living with one fear, that the Baptist church in the next few years might no longer be called a Baptist church. And the fear is that there will be something, he said, patch. He would not like the church to be patch. Now, what type of a Baptist church are you living in the next 9 months?
Well, he was right. According to him, what I see now is just as I said, that the world is revolving and the church cannot stay behind. You go to churches now, to some churches now, you hardly find a drum, because the jazz bands, the guitars, we have copied or imitated the Nigerians, and they are almost engulfing us. Many people are throwing away the drums. But in a local church, in where I worship and where I ministered, I always encourage the church to have its drums. I'm sure lastly in Abu district, some churches have xylophones that they play.
I remember just a week ago, Mr. Belo had his Thanksgiving, and I saw people playing the xylophone.
Xylophone in front of JMBC. You go to Abu, you have them. Metal has them. So those are things that I think that we need to also encourage to use our traditional instruments, because they give value and rhythm to the old people. But when you begin to play these things, they don't know. I don't think so. If I'm leaving the convention, I will not also be leaving with my head down. I've been revising my policy statement when I came into CNBC. I promised that I was going to get a movable asset for the convention, if not two, at least one, during my tenure of office. I promised that I was going to free the convention from debts. I promised that I was going to construct a befitting house for the executive president and the director of evangelism. I also promised that I was going to regularize the financial difficulties in monetary management of the convention. The only thing I have not done, which is in that my policy statement, is the office. But I have done the others. And you will never finish the work. It's in view. So I don't think that I'm afraid. I just know that the next person who comes should continue. I cannot completely stop xylophone. Bands, just bands, because we are also struggling with what we call the generation gap. There's a generational gap issue in the church. Either you take only the drums and send away all the young people, or you take the bands and send away all the old people. So the pastor should know to manage every congregation that he works in. Then that will be better, rather than thinking that if we stick only to our drums, it will be better. It will not be better. Yes. The church is the only institution that has every group of people having equal rights. Every group of people. You cannot see a church only made up of men, or only made up of women, or old people. the children's ministry is even evolving. Some churches have built a whole building for children's ministry, and there they are going.
We are ending with this one, the Baptist handbook. Many criticize the Baptists based on that in every case when they are talking about the Baptists, they will say we have our handbook which must be followed. What makes the handbook different from the Bible?
The handbook is the administrative book of the church. The things that have not been addressed in the Bible directly, the handbook handles them. In fact, in most churches, you will not see how a pastor should be called in the Bible. You will not see. You will not see how a church service should be run. We have not seen church services in the Bible. The order. We have not seen those things. And many other things. Many other things. So if you say the handbook is not there, you can bring disorder in the church. Because you don't understand what you are supposed to do. They have not told you how baptisms are being ministered in the Bible. You just say that they were baptized. How do you do it? So the handbook aligns, suggests, and propose, and think that should be followed. Because once you begin to say it is not useful, we think that you are saying that and doing some other things in the handbook now. You come to church, you begin Sunday school. Did you have Sunday school in the church, in the Bible? Do you know when it begins? The church order that you run here, you have it in the Bible? Where does it come from? From the handbook. If you see pastors doing an ordination council and doing the ordination ceremony, it is literally prescribed in the handbook. They don't just do it in their minds. They follow a procedure. Yeah.
So, is there a question that you thought I could ask you and I haven't asked, or is there a particular message you want to address to over 14,000 Christians you manage, and even some that are not part of your convention, that you want to give them a word in the midst of this crisis, this particular difficult season in the church, in Cameroon? Is there a particular message for the community at large?
I want to tell the community that the church is not a man-made institution. Christ is the head of the church. And those who lead the church should struggle as much as possible to be servant leaders. Because Christ led the church successfully because he was a servant leader. Or call on the pastors, the deacons, the leaders to revisit the leadership styles and find out what Christ did. I think that it is better to always ask yourself, if this was Christ in this particular situation, what would he have done? Every time you have a challenge, if it was Christ in this particular situation, what would he have done? You don't only ask that. You ask, you study your Bible, you pray, Christ will lead you. I want to call on our Christians. Our problem is not that we don't have people or that we are poor. The problem of the church is lack of commitment. It is lack of commitment. When churches don't engage in discipleship, the church is missing a mark. I will tell pastors, if you don't engage in discipleship, if you don't have people you sit every week and disciple them, and you think that you have a better church, I will say no. You cannot be praying to God to have a child when you are not married. It's not possible. It's not possible. You must disciple people so that God will lead them to the right places to do the right things. When you don't disciple the people in the church, forget. That's the core of the church, discipleship. The core of the church is discipleship. There are many people in our church who have not been discipled, and they are not committed. They are not committed. They do things sporadically. They are not consistent in their Christian lives because they have not been discipled. And if a pastor is not disciple, he cannot disciple another person. A disciple must disciple a disciple. This is what is killing the church. Lack of commitment. And it's attributed to lack of discipleship. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's been a long time together discussing issues, discussing the church in Cameroon, discussing the Cameroon National Baptist Convention, and getting to see the person that is at the head of this convention, Reverend Sujuel. We want to thank you so very much, sir, for this time you have spent with us, educating, informing us on what we need to know, what the church needs to know, and what we should be doing, preparing for that day when Jesus shall come back to take his church. And this is just coming after the resurrection day, that's Easter, and we use this singular opportunity to say Happy Easter to all those who are watching. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.